If you're meeting a potential client or applying for a pivotal job, you've probably had someone tell you that there are no second chances for a first impression. It's one of those canned adages we roll our eyes at, but sometimes the most prominent cliches never lose their relevance. Anyone can tell you that these moments of first contact can change the course of history. An inconsequential one-off could spell the difference between a stranger remaining just that or becoming a lifelong friend. Some of your pals might have never known you if you hadn't coincidentally met them at a certain place, during a certain time, while acting a certain way, and saying certain things. So first impressions are more important than we give them credit for, and that can go for how they impact what video games we play. By word of mouth or one trailer, a game might happen to pique our interest, but then it has to jump the tall hurdle of drawing you in for the first couple of hours. Why do you think gamers implore others to get through a slow premise, or deal with some boring gameplay to get to the good stuff? Because first impressions might cause you to miss the forest for the trees. In other words, you have to cut through those annoying trees blocking you from a lovely trail. Resist retreating from a potentially good journey. Hyperlight Drifter doesn't prompt this initial reaction. Right from the introduction, you'll encounter unforgettable views of its world of neon and decay. Everything is fantastical, yet foreboding. You can sense the apprehension lying ahead, but it's of a good sort that sparks fire within your chest. You're going on an adventure. That's what pulls you in. You're a nomadic drifter that has a deathly illness. He lives in a broken world that has undergone a widespread fallout, though traces of its exotic beauty remain. You're here to heal these lands and yourself from a demonic plague behind both of these maladies. As you explore, you'll find deceased giants, abandoned settlements, strange technologies, and a black jackal that follows you around. Is the dog a friend or foe? Who are you? What is this dark presence that has infected everything? More questions abound, but you aren't really meant to clearly understand your objectives or the premise. They can be understood through intensive study, but the ambiguity is purposeful and powerful. The game encourages personal interpretation, just as From Software, Playdead, and Gen Design are well known for doing with their own games. However, too much ambiguity can be detrimental to particular experiences, and this is one example that doesn't surface unscathed from this type of narrative delivery. One would think exploration would reveal answers outside of a normal progression, but you're frustratingly left with more questions, such as with these ancient tablets you'll discover that have a language of their own, and you can't figure out what they're for. There are other lingering questions beyond the ending, and while I did say much can be inferred, a casual approach will offer little to no concrete revelations. Regardless, you can't help but invest yourself in every piece of scenery and the pictorial tales told by others that contribute to Hyperlight Drifter's curiously cryptic story. So yes, you'll be doing a lot of looking, and it helps that the game's a looker in itself. From stone ruins amongst a rainy autumn forest to a white Atlantean city built atop crystal blue waters. Look, I want to live inside this world. I'd prefer it pre-apocalypse, but I'd take on all its dangers otherwise. It glows with an excellent palette of bright and subdued colors. There's an impeccable command over lighting, contrast, and scale here, which instill specific emotions when you come vis-a-vis with a giant's corpse or descend into a dark dungeon. This is doubly impressive considering the pixelated art style, and the game's screen scrolling is so smooth that, I kid you not, I thought the game was running in 60 frames per second for a while. The anthropomorphic character designs are nice enough for various NPCs, but it's the environments that ooze personality. Even the snazzy Tron-like UI and menus are satisfying to watch as you confirm selections and find upgrade nodes that blink into your collection. What, you find that a strange highlight? Okay then, here you go. See, now you know what I'm talking about. And, come to think of it, just as the visuals are intimately related to the story's impact, the same can be said of the visuals to the sound design. Those UI and menus are complemented by excellent sound effects. In this world, tech is akin to the retro sci-fi equipment you would find in the original Star Wars trilogy, scrapped together and rough around the edges. So it's appropriate that it sound hard and heavy, even with its partially 16-bit style. The game has distinct aural vibes, and the music is a key reason behind this. Disasterpiece, the composer of Fez and It Follows, couldn't have been a better pick. His proclivity for atmospheric and sparse tracks is on full display with his 16-bit library and synthesizers, occasionally mixed with real instrumentation like the piano and guitar. It's surprisingly minimalist, which may bore some people, but I find the soundtrack profoundly reflective and melancholy, speaking for the game's encompassing themes very well. Oh, right, gameplay. This is a top-down action RPG that's like a faster, slightly more unforgiving Bastion, which is a really good game, by the way. Combat is about using your sword to hack and slash enemies while avoiding their advances with well-timed dodges. Whittling down their health with a growing gun arsenal adds wrinkles to how and when you position yourself strategically. And that's not including secondary abilities like chaining dodges, deflecting projectiles, tossing grenades, or charging up a simple slash to a sweeping strike. It's a simple system that becomes more sophisticated as you master it, but I don't sympathize with most critics in regards to the difficulty. I was actually surprised by the ease of defeating some bosses, which I was able to vanquish in 3 attempts on average. You see, overwhelming groups of enemies is where most of the challenge lies, which tested the limits of my reflexes and observational skills on occasion. It's these encounters that reveal just how snappy and responsive the controls are as well. Hyper Light Drifter feels good, because like Dark Souls, I rarely felt like I was cheated. Whenever I got hit, I could attribute these missteps to my own impatience and ineptitude. You're not only supposed to be fast, but also restrained by stringing together moves intelligently. It's a good design philosophy, but does it provide a brutal experience emulating the aforementioned Death Simulator? Hardly. But the same type of tough fairness is here. I believe Hyper Light Drifter is manageable, yet challenging enough as long as you're attuned to the flow of the game's ever-pleasing gameplay, which has a solid assortment of foes and bosses to keep things interesting. To heighten your proficiency with those upgrades, it pays to examine every nook and cranny of a giant open world. However, you'll still overlook secret areas and cleverly concealed items that will baffle you if you look them up in walkthroughs. You won't want to, though. I couldn't resist the urge to search for invisible pathways and feel my way around seemingly sealed-off walls for a hidden door on my own. Some of this stuff can get a bit ridiculous sometimes, but as a whole, Heart Machine should be applauded for crafting a cohesive, complex world packed to the brim. It captures much of the allure of its biggest inspiration, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, by balancing player agency with open exploration without overwhelming those looking for subtle signposting. That's good level design that's hard to come by, but by dropping you within a city hub surrounded by sectors in the north, south, east, and west that can be taken on in different orders, Hyper Light Drifter gives you freedom while retaining semblances of linearity. And since you can veer off the beaten path to engage optional dungeons, my quest for the unknown was exhilarating. I adored the different challenges they posed, with some tricky platforming and enemy groups to tackle. Even now, I feel the urge to go back and figure out what stones I left unturned. Hyper Light Drifter sits at 8 hours if you decide to rush through it. Should you desire to get lost along the way, which I highly encourage, that will add another 4 hours, I'd say, which is why you're sure to get 10 to 12 hours out of the game. It feels a tad shorter than I would have liked, as another section would have greatly benefited the length for a perfectly appropriate playtime, but even then, I thoroughly enjoyed what's here and would venture into New Game Plus to explore the world and its deeper secrets. With less health too, it would be a definite challenge appropriately comparable to Miyazaki's Soul series. I've heard it said that some of the highest works of art arise from the lowest of times in a creator's life. Depression, anxiety, fear. These are a handful of struggles mentally embedded in us, or ones that arise from other circumstances. Heart Machine's lead creator, Alex Preston, is an example of a ladder as someone born with congenital heart disease. I can understand where he comes from, as I've personally witnessed a similar suffering in another. But like this loved one, Preston demonstrates that good can still come from afflictions like these, and for him, it takes the form of Hyperlight Drifter. It imaginatively exudes his personal ruminations on loneliness, pain, and temporality across its story, visuals, and audio. However, silver linings of beauty and perseverance can be found between the dark lines of its thematic consistency. Further substance comes from its full world that will quicken your heart rate with its hyper combat, or lower it with calming treks and views that simply captivate. This is an adventure that may feel too safe and even aimless for differing reasons at times, but your interest will never lose sight of the light on the horizon that keeps you wandering, drifting onward. That's why I deem Hyperlight Drifter to be in a confidently high, healthy state.